The US is falling behind China on science, but bipartisan legislation aimed at countering China might turn the tide if politicians don't screw it up. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. The United States is falling behind China. It's especially bad in the sciences. The U.S. used to lead the world in research and development, but its share of global research and development decreased from 69% in 1960 to 28% in 2018. On the other hand, China has surpassed most countries in R&D expenditures since 2008. And at this rate, they'll soon overtake the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party takes their push to be a science superpower seriously, which is why the U.S. and China are in the middle of the chip wars. No, Seamus, you know what I meant. The U.S. and China are battling for semiconductor supremacy. So why are semiconductors a big deal? Well, semiconductors are the brains of modern technology. They're the backbone of economic and military performance in the digital age. Semiconductors are essential for nearly every important technology we need in modern life, like Furbies. Secure access to leading-edge semiconductors will drive new technologies in defense, including faster networks, cloud computing, unmanned systems, cybersecurity, and AI, all components of U.S. future defense planning. Okay, so semiconductors aren't just used for Furbies. They're also used for cutting-edge military technology, like military drone Furbies. China now accounts for 24% of the global semiconductor consumption, making it the second largest market, almost as big as the US. And China's semiconductor manufacturing has grown to 15% of the world's total capacity in 2020. And the Chinese Communist Party really wants to dominate semiconductor manufacturing, so no one can cut their supply off, like the US did when the Trump administration sanctioned Chinese telecom Huawei. The US, though, went from producing 37% of the world's semiconductors in 1990 to just 12% today. So as I said, the US has been falling behind, and China is pushing forward. Semiconductors are a national security issue, but the U.S. has historically taken defensive measures. That means things like blocking exports of semiconductor manufacturing equipment, restricting sales of chips built with American equipment, and blocking Chinese acquisitions of U.S. chip makers. But these policies don't strengthen the American semiconductor industry. They simply slow down China's takeover. Soon, we'll see the Communist Party's military with their own weaponized Furbies. And if you still had any doubts about the reality of this threat, try this one on for size. This is something Democrats and Republicans agree on. This is something Trump and Biden agree on. In fact, in a time when things are probably more politically divided than ever, many Democrats and Republicans are working together to do something about the threat. I'll tell you what it is right after this quick commercial break. Welcome back. Democrats and Republicans are actually working together. Two bipartisan bills, both aimed at countering China, are currently going through Congress. One is the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. It's aimed at increasing funding for the sciences, especially advanced technology like semiconductors. The other is the Ensuring American Global Leadership and Engagement Act, the EAGLE Act for short. It's pretty clear where they got the name. The EAGLE Act focuses on foreign policy and diplomacy to counter China. I'll get to that one in a moment. The U.S. Innovation and Competition Act is the brainchild of Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Todd Young.
We're finally taking action to correct the decades-old underfunding in science and technology.
If it passes, the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act would give about $190 billion to strengthen U.S. technology in general, plus $52 billion for encouraging more semiconductor production in the U.S. which is important for America's national strategic technology stockpile. Another provision would ban downloads of the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok on all government phones. Previous bans included military and homeland security devices. And anything that kills TikTok is a good thing. I mean, have you seen the kind of garbage that goes on there? No one needs to see that. Then there's the Eagle Act. It was put forward by Democrat Gregory Meeks, chairman of the U.S. House Committee on Foreign Affairs. He's working with Republicans on the committee to make the Eagle Act happen. I love it when China brings Americans together. The Eagle Act focuses on expanding diplomatic efforts to compete against China.
America has a clear task ahead of it. Diplomacy has to be the cornerstone of how we go forward. Our military might is second to none, but we must invest in our institutions and, most importantly, our international alliances, because these are the true sources of our unique and enduring strength.
Okay, that sounds good, but what specifically will it do? Well, among other things, the Eagle Act puts a big focus on small countries.
It shines a light on many of the countries typically ignored by American foreign policy, including the Pacific Island states, states in the Caribbean, and on the continent of Africa. These countries are often at the front line of international and transnational threats and are especially vulnerable because of the lack of international infrastructure, technological, and cyber-related standards. They are looking for U.S. leadership in strengthening a rules-based order, and this act positions the United States government to do just that.
The Eagle Act also addresses human rights concerns. It calls China's treatment of Uyghurs genocide. And it provides temporary protected status and refugee status for Hong Kongers. It also calls for a review of Chinese companies on the U.S. stock market. Like, do these Chinese companies have links to the Chinese military? Have they engaged in intellectual property theft? Or human rights violations? You know, things the U.S. really shouldn't be funding. Now, despite presenting the Eagle Act as a bill to counter and compete with China, Congressman Meeks calls for cooperation with China in areas of common interest, especially climate change. Meeks says that China has to be part of the solution for tackling global issues like climate change and global health. You know, considering China is going on a coal spree and they covered up the coronavirus to hoard medical supplies, you gotta wonder if the Chinese Communist Party really wants to be part of the solution. Now, I know with all this bipartisan cooperation in the U.S., putting differences aside and working together for the common good of America, you might think you've slipped into a better timeline. Don't worry, you haven't. It's still been incredibly difficult for Democrats and Republicans to work together on this. There's been loads of arguing and name-calling. More after the break. And we're back. So yeah, what's with all this bipartisan togetherness? Well, don't start singing Kumbaya just yet, because there's been plenty of Republicans and Democrats who don't want to work together. Take the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. It began as the Endless Frontier Act, but over the past 3 months, more and more things were added to the bill until it swelled to more than 2,400 pages, drawing sharp opposition from a core group of GOP senators, even though a lot of those additions were made by Republicans. Republican Senator Rick Scott said, "We haven't had time to read this. No one has." And Republican Senator John Kennedy said, "We did a piss-poor job of negotiating this. Schumer is running around like a 5-year-old in a Batman costume. He's so excited." See? You're still in the same awful timeline. Even though the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act is expected to pass, because of the backlash, the vote has been postponed until June 8th, when senators are scheduled to return from a week-long Memorial Day recess. If the bill passes the Senate, it will go to the House of Representatives before going to President Biden, who has already expressed support for it. Of course he does. It's got a $250 billion price tag. Joe Biden loves spending money. He's even proposed a $6 trillion budget to make the U.S. more competitive. But a lot of progressives are not happy about these two bills aimed at countering China either. They say it's too much spending and government intervention. I'm kidding. They say the bills are racist. They fear rushing to position China as an existential threat to the U.S. would fuel hatred at home, similar to the Islamophobia seen after 9/11. In response to the initiatives, over 65 progressive organizations issued a joint statement condemning the rhetoric against China. It's a dangerously short-sighted worldview that presents China as the pivotal existential threat. The anti-China framing is not only politically unnecessary, but also harmful, as it inevitably feeds racism, violence, xenophobia, and white nationalism. You know, that's a good point. Trying to stop China's genocide of Uyghur Muslims is definitely a sign of white nationalism. Now, progressives like Representative Ilhan Omar are right in saying that we need to distinguish between the Chinese government and Chinese Americans and not mistreat Chinese people. But when you say things like the true global security challenges of today, like economic inequality, climate change, pandemics, and ethno-nationalism, will require joint, non-military solutions with China, I have a feeling these progressives are being too optimistic about cooperation with the Chinese Communist Party, the party that is committing ethnic genocide. So what do you think about these bills aimed at countering China? Can the U.S. catch up? And who will win the Furby Wars? Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.